Let's get started. Our speaker tonight is Kenny Palurintano. Kenny is an Agorist chef, crypto educator, libertarian activist. He's lived out of a backpack for almost a decade. He's been unbanked for nearly 2 decades, and he is the founder of the Free Ross Now project. So give it up for Kenny. Just use the one over there.
All right. Hello, everyone. Hello, beautiful humans. Yeah, as he mentioned there briefly, I'm Kenny Palurintano. I've been unbanked since 2008. I've lived out of a backpack since 2015. I've never registered to vote, never voted, never paid taxes outside of like things built into sales where you don't really have a choice. And I avoid that as much as I can. But I'm here to speak about Ross Ulbricht and his case. Well, I'm going to kind of go with the Silk Road itself and kind of what it was, why it was important, and then into the case itself, what happened there, what's been happening since, and of course the last year and the drastic change that's been happening. And then we'll talk a little bit about others around the world and especially here at home in the US who are currently receiving similar lawfare due to their dedication to liberty. So Ross Ulbricht, if you don't know, he is he turned 40 this year. He's serving a 240-year sentence. He, as a young guy, he was big in the libertarian movement. He was a free stater out in New Hampshire. He went to the Pork Fest a bunch of times. He was obsessed with Rothbard, and he was obsessed with Bitcoin when he found it because he had gotten deep in the economic side of things. And he believed that a free market, the freer the market, the more people would be able to do, and that a free market, especially with not regulation, but ways for people to self-regulate, easy ways to self-regulate, is what we need to solve so many of our problems. He was also, he's an Eagle Scout. He was an Order of the Air. Like, he went through all the mainstream, like, in another life, he probably would have been in the military and stuff, right? He's like very classic American good kid. And then he created the Silk Road in 2011. Obviously, I don't know he hasn't ever like shared his whole personal story, so we don't know the little details of exactly what happened. But he created the Silk Road in 2011. It was the first dark web market is how it's referred to. Basically, it was eBay with less rules and not connected to banks or government in any way, right? So the main things that they outlawed, and it changed. At first, they had less rules, and they quickly implemented some more. The main things that they had rules against were just that which would harm other people. No weapons, nothing to do with children, that sort of thing. People bring up that there were still examples of that, just like anytime you try to put a rule against something, somebody's going to sneak through. But that was their effort, was for it to just be things that wouldn't harm other people. The biggest use, obviously, was illegal drugs. At the time, cannabis was actually illegal in all 50 states still. Weird to think about that. At one point, that was illegal in every state in the US. So that was, according to Carnegie Mellon, that was 70% of the illegal transactions on the Silk Road were for cannabis and cannabis substances. So that kind of sets things into perspective when you think about like a drug marketplace is kind of what it's framed as. And a big part of the Silk Road was the forums and the book clubs and the education that went along with it. So Ross didn't just like create this thing. And there's a lot of people that think that it's probably not just Ross that was involved in this, and we'll get into some specific reasons later, but let's just say Ross did these things because he has like legally accepted responsibility. They would have book clubs about liberty. They would have book clubs about different chemicals and different treatment programs, different therapy practice, like spiritual stuff. They had a huge focus on teaching people how to be safe with drugs when they get in terms of like in the setting where they're at, in terms of getting test kits for anything that they're doing, that sort of, the sort of thing that doesn't exist on the street, obviously. The Drug Policy Alliance, which is not something that would normally agree with some hardcore agorist libertarian crowd, they put out a statement when the Silk Road got shut down saying that they found that it was without a doubt a harm reducing factor in America. After a year and a half of the Silk Road running, and actually to the crypto piece, we'll just say the Bitcoin piece, the day that the Silk Road launched, Bitcoin was trading between 40 and 60 cents a piece. Let that sink in real quick. We hit 100K today again. So a year and a half or so later, there was an interview that went out through Wired magazine with the Dread Pirate Roberts, which was the name of the admin, the main admin behind the Silk Road, which Ross admitted to being. But one of the things in that interview, along with talking about how much money was moving through, like the government's eyes and ears just perked right up when this interview came out, because they're like, wait, there's millions of dollars potentially flowing through this thing and we have no way to get a hold of it? We're going to change that. But also in that interview, whoever they were talking to, because it was just an anonymous person called DPR, Dread Pirate Roberts, that they had supposedly confirmed was really that person. But that person said that someone else had actually built the Silk Road and handed it off to them. And a lot of people, especially folks that were around in the Bitcoin talk forums and stuff back in these days, a lot of people think that Satoshi actually built the Silk Road and then handed it off to Ross and a few other people like Curtis Green that were the main admins. So there's a whole lot of strange stuff there too. And a lot of people think that Ross is currently serving Satoshi's sentence because Satoshi had better OPSEC and he didn't get caught. So starting with that interview in Wired, there began a huge, like just massive sting operation. Multiple agencies, Secret Service, DEA, FBI. I swear somebody else was involved. Definitely those three were the big ones. And they were coming after the Silk Road. They were coming after anyone involved with it in so many different ways. And there's stuff that we didn't learn until years later. During that time, the CIA and the NSA, that's who else was involved, the NSA, they actually managed to take control of over 90% of Tor nodes. So if you know Tor, the Onion network, supposedly private, except that they control almost all of it and have for over a decade. So it's great as long as you can trust who's running it, but you can't. Not to say that it's and there's new features have been added, not the point, but that's how big they thought this was at the time. They spent insane amounts. They had a whole task force, the Baltimore Special Task Force that worked on Mt. Gox. If you remember that huge scam, this same task force was sort of readjusted, a few people in, a few people out, and then moved on to the Silk Road. And there's a whole lot of crazy stuff that's come out of that over the years. That task force, there's a lot of stolen money along the way that reappeared in other places and stuff too. But basically they ran, it's like 60s civil rights COINTELPRO level infiltration scheme. They had dozens of agents working as sellers or getting in as admins on the Silk Road. They had a 0-day hat exploit or something. They got into the back door and actually had access to everything, including changing people's messages after they'd been sent. They could do stuff as the Dread Pirate Roberts account or any of the other admins without those admins knowing about it. The two main agents on the case, Carl Mark Force and Sean Bridges, actually both later pled guilty, and both I think they served about 5 or 6 years each for blackmail, extortion, corruption, obstruction of justice. Neither of them was ever made to decrypt their laptop or decrypt any of the communications that they had during that time. So this is what was happening as Ross was not realizing, I think, that he was quite the target, is these guys were already stealing huge amounts of money from the back end. It's absolutely insane what was going on. And finally, they came after Ross. They took him down in a library. There's a whole weird thing where they staged a fight, knowing that he would go help because he's that kind of person. And they managed to grab his laptop while it was open. He didn't have a chance to close it. And that was the thing that they needed because they couldn't get past his encryption. And yeah. So that trial, that's where things really got crazy, right? Like when most people in the world heard of the Silk Road the day that he got arrested. The day that the news really came, like they became a huge thing, that's when it was like this massive news story suddenly. Bitcoin was $140 that day. It dropped to about 82 on the news of him getting arrested. Again, just tells you how important he was for this ecosystem. Over the course of that trial, they ran a huge smear campaign. The agents, actually Karl Mark Force is the one that there's pretty solid evidence of. He created a fake murder for hire scheme. He actually forced this guy, Curtis Green, who I know personally now. Curtis was one of the admins on the Silk Road. He threatened and forced Curtis to fake his own death so they could take pictures of it and use that as evidence of Ross having hired someone to kill somebody. So they charged him with all this murder for hire scheme, like 6 charges of murder for hire, only one victim who's still very much alive. And they filed those charges in a different district from his other like 78 charges. And then they ran him in the news nonstop. All across the world, they ran him in the news. There's a movie made out of him. There was a book made out of him, American Kingpin, terrible book, just massive hit piece, ignores so many things that were in the trial. And they just ran this story, and that's what people heard. Ross Ulbricht is a serial killer. He's a murderer. Some version of this. No evidence. Never went to trial. No evidence. No witnesses. No, nothing at all except for a DM conversation between the Dread Pirate Roberts account that we know the agents had access to, and that was continued to be used for about 2.5 weeks after Ross was in prison. That's the evidence. But the judge let that be used, those untried charges, she let that be entered into his trial as character evidence, even though it was untried. And then at the same time, those 2 agents who had already been indicted during the trial, but were not convicted yet, she let their testimony stand. And all of the evidence that they touched, I mean, obviously, it was basically the whole case was fruit of the poison tree at this point, right? When your lead agents are stealing money from people and faking murder schemes, and you can't. There's nothing like, even if someone clearly did really bad stuff, it would be thrown out in most courts because it's such a mess. She let that stand. They later it was like 3 months after Ross got put away that those guys were convicted, and a couple of years later that they just quietly dropped the murder for hire charges with prejudice, meaning he cannot be charged with that again. Another sign that they had nothing. He was charged, I mentioned it briefly earlier, he was sentenced 240 years without parole for all nonviolent, victimless crimes as a first-time offender of any kind. And the judge in her sentencing, Judge Catherine Forrest, who got her seat from Chuck Schumer, actually recommended her personally in a public statement to Obama. The prosecutor on the case, I forget his name, something with an H on his last name, he also got his job from Chuck Schumer, who ran for re-election on taking down the Silk Road and Ross Ulbricht. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. I'm a coincidence noticer sometimes. But she said in the actual sentencing 2 really important things. One, I don't know the exact wording. I've pulled it out. It's easy to find though. But she said something to the effect of, your dangerous libertarian ideology is why the sentence is so strong. That, and because, again, paraphrasing, to use you as an example to stop others from trying to create systems like this. Like, they literally admitted in court, it's in the court documents, in the sentencing, that they were just making an example out of him to try to stop agorism, Bitcoin. We know they're not trying to stop the drug trade. They're trying to stop competition for the CIA in the drug trade, maybe. But yeah, it was really insane. And he went through two appeals, right? The Supreme Court refused to hear it. So it went to one appellate court, and then the Supreme Court refused to hear it. The one court upheld everything. They kept the agents' testimonies, even though they were currently in prison. They kept the murder for hire, even though it had as allowed to be part of the story, even though it had no evidence, had never been tried. They basically just rubber stamped the same thing. Ross actually spent almost a decade here in Colorado. I forget the name of it, but at the maximum security prison here. As a, again, nonviolent victimless offender. He was in a maximum security prison, usually on protective custody a lot. So he spent months in the hole at a time, where he'd be in a 10 by 8 foot room with no sunlight, no human interaction, a tray of food slipped through the door. The longest time, I think it was 4.5 months that they left him in there. He's allowed to basically communicate through writing letters, and his family can come see him and make phone calls very, very rarely. It's a little better now. He's been at USP Tucson for 3 years, I want to say, and that is a high security instead of a maximum security. Has a little bit more freedom, not nearly, because of his charges. He's not allowed near the computers or the phones or anything, because it's like wire fraud related, hacking related, that sort of stuff. So he's basically totally cut off from the world. And while he's been in there, he's been tutoring people in math. He's been teaching meditation classes. He's been if you're on X, you can follow him. Real Ross U is his account. His family, he writes little stuff and his family posts it. And it's just this inspiring, really magical, heartfelt stuff that he's been sharing this whole time. He writes blog posts that get put out on Medium too. He writes on paper and they put it up, and it's just really beautiful to see. And his mother, Lynn Ulbricht, if you don't know her, she is a powerhouse in the libertarian movement. One of the most powerful speakers I've ever heard, and I've been to all the conferences. She is amazing. And she's been keeping this up. She's in her mid-70s, and she's been out there a full-time activist since Ross got locked up. And it was just so inspiring to so many of us over the last decade seeing that. And that's where the story takes a really positive turn. So a decade of push, people are pushing the signatures on the petitions up over 600,000 signatures. There's been little documentaries. There's been people talk about it every year on the anniversary of him getting arrested or the anniversary of the Silk Road being launched, these things. But nobody really, there was nothing moving. Nothing had progressed as far as we could tell in any way. And last year, actually, I was here in Colorado when this started for me. I connected with a community online that wanted to push for Ross a bunch and get people to sign, just get out and get people to sign the signature or the petition and that sort of thing and make it happen. And I've known Lynn for 9 years or so now, and I live out of a backpack partially because I'm just floating. I just show up wherever I'm supposed to show up and do whatever the universe wants me to do. And in that, it was one of those where I'm seeing this. I've known about Ross's story for a long time. I've known Lynn for a long time, but something, I could feel it last week. I could feel that he was going to get out soon. I just knew it was going to happen, and we just had to lean into it. And so Ross has been my 8 to 12 to 16 hour a day job since early March, late February. And we just started getting out on X in the real world, wearing all my shirts that I wear every day are all a rotation of Free Ross shirts currently. I always just wear billboards of freedom, but for the last year, it's just 6 different Free Ross shirts I rotate through. We mostly directly from his family, but we do also have our own merch store set up now with our designs. This is our logo, Free Ross Now, with the little dove and everything. And then the freerossnow.store is ours, and then freeross.org is the family's, where everything is. Our project, all of our links are just freerossnow.com is our main one, and then .store is this and the merch, and we send the proceeds to Ross. And actually, we've got the gentleman who runs the merch store here in the house, but I won't shout him out too much in case he wants to stay stealthy. But okay. But yeah, so we get started in February, March. His birthday's in March. We hosted a 40th birthday party for him on Twitter Spaces, and had a bunch of friends. Some of you probably, most of you know Derek Brose. Derek Brose was at the trial reporting on it back when it went down. My friend John Bush, who helped create the Freedom Cell Network, he also was there at the trial when it was happening. So we had them and people like Tatiana Moroz and Jordan Page who have songs about Ross. We had this big space. And when I shared it with Lynn, she was like weeping as she listened to it because she had thought that everybody forgot about Ross, kind of. Obviously, if you looked online, you could see it's like always a thing, kind of. But she just wasn't feeling it. And I don't know all of the things that happened between there and there, but that was mid-March. And then in May 13th, Rolling Stone put out an article titled, "He helped create the Silk Road. Now it's time to release Ross Ulbricht, or let Ross Ulbricht free," or something like that, which was wild because every article they'd written about the Silk Road or Ross before was very negative. 2 weeks later, at the Libertarian Party National Convention, Trump promised to free Ross on day one. He's repeated that promise multiple times. He repeated it at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville. He's repeated it like 2 other times I think of. I think Don Jr. has said it a couple times. Obviously, Vivek Ramaswamy had promised to free Ross on day one back when he was running. And so there's multiple people on the team that have said it since then as well. And obviously, in a space like this, I would assume most of you, like me, tend to not trust politicians, especially things that they say while they're running for office. But so in this case, I have 2 angles on it, right? One is we're keeping the volume cranked. I'm here for about 3 days, and I'm flying to DC. I'll be at the inauguration, handing out 10,000 of those black and white free Ross signs that you saw at the conferences earlier this year to make sure it's right there in his face, right to the last minute. We have a whole compilation album releasing on Friday with more than a dozen musicians. Almost all the music is brand new, unreleased. A few of them have been out before, like Tatiana's song is from back when the trial was happening, actually. But we're republishing the few that existed, and then we commissioned like 8 or 9 new songs about Ross and the Silk Road and just this piece of the movement. And all the funds from the album will be going to Ross and his family directly. And the other piece is I think that Trump basically had a thing to sell, Ross Ulbricht's freedom, and he sold it to a whole bunch of different people. Because I wasn't in many of the back rooms at all, but he made deals with the Libertarian Party. He got over $100 million in crypto donations to his, or in Bitcoin specifically, donations to his campaign, and then who knows what else privately after making the promise at the Bitcoin conference. He promised it to Thomas Massie, and that's why Thomas Massie actually, that was like one of the main promises he had to make to him personally in order for him to endorse Trump. There's just, it doesn't feel so much like a campaign promise as much as like a business deal that just kind of already locked in and he can't sign off the paperwork until he's in his position. So we'll see. If he doesn't, there's lots of plans that a lot of us will be posting online constantly. I'm sure there will be a lot of very aggressive stuff going on. A couple members of our community will be in DC doing a hunger strike at the front of the White House if it doesn't happen. Maybe not day one, but in the first couple days. We'll give them 48 hours leeway or something. I don't know. But we're not going to be like, it's midnight, you didn't do it. But we're not waiting until February. Like if it doesn't happen right away, that the steps will be taken, all peaceful, obviously, like just making noise, making it uncomfortable in as whatever ways we can. If you haven't noticed, the independent media is the big media now. And, we already know Tucker Carlson's on board, Joe Rogan's on board. Like all those guys have already, at least in interviews with people, said that they're like pro Free Ross. They think he should be let out too. So if it doesn't happen, it'll be pretty easy to get a lot of noise made, I think. Yeah, so we're hopefully getting Ross out. It's been 11 and a half years, right? Yeah, this is a big thing. It's only one guy, but at the same time, it's like, how often do we get to run campaigns where we increase freedom by such a clear, visible level? Like one human goes from basically zero freedom to the normal level the rest of us have, roughly. Like that's huge, right? Like he has not touched grass or a tree or seen stars since 2013. Like, that's insane. So, yeah, the two pieces that I kind of want to spin out from really briefly from here before we go into the questions and answer section are, one, the ways that this stuff gets done, right? Like, I'm obviously apolitical or even anti-political, but you can affect politics by raising the volume on something, right? Politics is a feedback loop with public opinion. So by cranking the public opinion about something, it doesn't mean that it's not, just because Monsanto's unpopular or the military-industrial complex is unpopular, doesn't mean that they're just going to shut it down. But you can apply pressure in that way that makes it more, politically beneficial for people that are in that game to start playing with it too. And it's just been really great to see this like collaboration of people just out talking about it, people working at the like backroom levels, like Angela McArdle at the LP and Tommy and all those guys with the Bitcoin conference and bringing Trump to those two things and making him promise, both, like, there's all this work that happened over this last decade, and it's just so beautiful to see and to be able to play this little role in it where we, our community of a few hundred people have been able to come together online. We have a meme coin, right? It's a cryptocurrency, Free Ross Now, FRN. The actual meme of it is that we burn FRNs constantly. It's a deflationary currency. So all volume has a 2% tax. 1% of that goes straight to Ross. 1% gets burnt. So it's just a fun thing. We've been able to donate, I want to say we're up to close to $45,000 to Ross and his family without anybody having to like donate, just by like creating a thing where the donation is part of the function. And I know there's probably lots of opinions about crypto because there's lots of different crypto, from Bitcoin to Ripple, which is very much the banks, and there's so much to it. But just the fact that this technology, blockchain technology, very much allows us to move in ways that we couldn't before without jumping through the hoops, like without setting up a nonprofit or without, like, how else are you going to take donations from thousands of people and send it somewhere if you don't have bank account? Unbanked since 2008. Like, I had no way to do so much of this stuff, like even buying plane tickets before I got into crypto. I had to like give someone else cash to put on their card or something like that. With crypto, we can do the money side, we can do the investing, I was already talking to Kyle about spinning up a crypto, so for his publishing. So it's like, instead of trying to launch it as a company with stock, you basically do the same thing, but in the crypto world. And it's so easy for non-coders to do this stuff now. And there's a huge marketplace of people that are into that side of things, into crypto, because of the revolutionary aspects, because of the libertarian ethos, and they're looking for projects to be involved in. And then on the flip side, because that's like more positive, like there's just so much stuff we can do, so much stuff's happening. I could list off dozens of projects working on whether it's hunger, water, cancer, like all these things just in the crypto space. They're still going after people in the crypto space. They may be talking about a Bitcoin reserve. They might be talking about getting rid of taxes on crypto. They might be talking about these things, but they're waging lawfare on people right now. Like Roman Storm was you got 25 years, I want to say, for building a cryptocurrency tool. Like so the Tornado Cash devs, the Samurai devs, basically all the major privacy projects they're coming after now, and they're charging them with money laundering. They're charging that because the tool could be used for that, basically. They're like, because you built something that could be used for this, we're going to charge you with it. And then they're going after people like Roger Ver. If any of you remember, Roger Ver is referred to as Bitcoin Jesus. He is one of the biggest investors in crypto projects back in the day. All the early Bitcoin stuff, he funded so much of it. And we're finding out just over the last year, after he got charged and they're coming after him, he was also basically single-handedly funding most of the independent media and just telling them not to tell people about it, or just not bragging about it. He was funding the Free Thought Project, Police the Police, the Conscious Resistance Network, the Last American Vagabond, Corbett Report. I mean, dozens of multiple Bitcoin tours that people took. I mean, so many people and projects he was funding without even asking for them to plug him at all. He left the US a decade ago, renounced citizenship, did the exit paperwork, did all of that stuff, had a lawyer, had a tax accountant go through all of it with him, hasn't even come to the US in 7 or 8 years, I think. And currently he's trying to extradite him from Spain. They're trying to put him away for 109 years, saying that they're saying that his Bitcoin, the year that he filed, he was wrong, and it was actually worth, I forget what the number was, like 47 million or something. They're claiming that it was worth more than 5 times the total trading volume of Bitcoin that year. Because that's how they do it. It doesn't matter that your house couldn't sell for that price. They're going to claim that you owe them taxes on whatever the top value of your house is. The same thing with assets. If you could sell all of them at full value right now, that's what you have to pay on. And his people told him a different way of doing the math, and so now they're trying to go after him. And it's very political. He's offered to pay whatever fines they want, and they just said, no, we're going to take you to court. It also, I don't want to get too much into the politics of Bitcoin, but I will just say that they came after him about a week after he published his book, Hijacking Bitcoin. Whether or not it's related, I don't know, but he hasn't been able to speak publicly since. So that's just one example, and Ian Freeman, the Bitcoin 6 out in New Hampshire, they're just running Bitcoin ATMs. He's in prison still. He's the only one that didn't plead out. As you know, the prison system and the legal system is designed to just get people to plead guilty by threatening them with outrageous stuff. That way they just keep getting these precedents, these cases, they get people on paper, they get them in the system. So the other 5 of the Bitcoin 6 all took plea deals, had to do, house arrest, etc. And Ian said, no, I'm not going to agree. I did not do anything wrong. I did not commit a crime. And yeah, he's chilling in prison. And there's a lot of these folks. And it's not just the US, there's other countries too. We probably don't even hear about the ones that are happening in Russia or China or places like that. So it's just important to hold that balance, right? Like, we can do anything. We can get somebody out of a cage. We can end a war. We can end starvation anywhere and everywhere. We can do anything if enough people put the will in to do it. Yeah, and yeah, let's just do it. All right, yeah. Questions? Yep, she had her hand back.
Where's the first one?
Thank you for coming. When Ross was sentenced and the judge used the murder for hire that he was not charged with, but actually put that in her sentencing and said, this man is really dangerous because he's trying to basically pay people to kill other people. Yeah. I was just surprised that was not unconstitutional as fuck, because it should be. He was not charged with that. How can you sentence someone on what they are not charged with? Yeah. My question is about Tor, and how we all know that it's, a project of the United States Navy and out of DARPA, yeah. And that our government controls all of the exit nodes.
At least a lot of them, yeah.
Yeah. So
if not all.
Has anyone ever done a Freedom of Information Act to actually see what government involvement was into creating, setting it up? Because if you ever read about anytime they arrest a terrorist, right, it's usually our government that has held their hand every step of the way. Has anyone ever done that, and what has come of it?
I don't know. I'm sure somebody has filed them by now, and they give you the runaround so much on FOIA requests. I haven't seen anything. It would definitely be interesting to, like, even now, what we know is from people who are like either whistleblowers or were on. So like the control that happened back then, we know from Curtis Green, that Silk Road admin who supposedly got killed but didn't. Because Force, Karl Mark Force, they were communicating a lot, and he bragged to him about things, including the fact that they controlled all the exit nodes. And he actually, so Curtis was also facing charges on the Silk Road stuff. So he actually wasn't able to talk about any of it until more than 5 years later. So that was a whole screwy thing too. There was, he has a book as well. The Silk Road Takedown is kind of his angle on it. Really, being on the inside and being a huge part of the fraud that was made out of the case and all of this stuff. Really, really good read.
Okay, I got a question. Who do you think was the true mastermind behind the Silk Road, and how did Mark Karpellis get away with it?
Right. It's really crazy. I don't know. I don't know what happened there. It's like the fact that Ross owns up, like he claims, like he takes responsibility for creating and running, but there's so many things that point at other people. And then for those of you who don't know, also, when the Silk Road ended, then Silk Road 2 launched immediately after. And there was all this other, there's so many people around this that were kept doing the same thing after Ross got locked up. Nothing actually changed. A URL went down, basically. And a bunch of Bitcoin got seized. I didn't even mention that part. They keep selling Ross's Bitcoin. And the Bitcoin stolen from, every time you hear about the U.S. government selling Bitcoin, it's pretty much Silk Road Bitcoin most of the time. They just cleared that back in December to sell another 69,000 Silk Road Bitcoins that they stole. But I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. I honestly think whoever, or whether Satoshi's a person or a team or whatever there, I think Satoshi made the Silk Road. It seems like the way that they match up, and then maybe Ross was Satoshi. Like the fact that when you look at when Satoshi last posted, it's like right before Ross got arrested. I don't know. And it could all just be like, there's people that think Bitcoin's just the CIA too. And who knows? Who knows? But it's like, that's the I mean, if you take the Stirnerite approach, right? Like it's all spooks. Everything's a spook. Like it's all, so, I mean, I just assume at least 40% of you are feds. And, it's like, we can do that. We can play we can play it that way, but it's like, I don't know. I'm open to the possibility of anything being whatever until it's proven otherwise. But I try not to get stuck on any story, especially not disempowering ones that make the powers that wish they were seem godlike. Yeah. Yeah.
How long?
For the video.
How long on those 2 lead investigators who got arrested, how long did it take for them from going to being legitimate to, working the system for their own benefit?
Really hard to say. Because, I mean, they were both on the job for years before that case, before they got involved in that task force. So, but we don't know that they were honest at that point, right? Like, they could have been. But definitely, it seems like as soon as the task force started going after the Silk Road stuff, money started disappearing. Things started getting shady pretty quick. And maybe that was one guy and he talked others into it, or maybe it was all of them immediately oh, wait, we're the task force for this thing that nobody understands yet? Sure, yeah, this is great. It's hard to say. And they never had, it was such short trial. They pled out. Both of the agents did. So there wasn't really any big trial with we didn't get to see all the stuff because they took plea deals. So it's we don't even know. We don't know how much they walked away with. We don't know an actual breakdown of how many people they screwed over in different ways. We have no idea what they actually did, except for what was obvious and what we know from other people like Curtis sharing his experience with them.
Just wanted to add a quick anecdote on that. So I believe it was Karl Mark Force. He was actually sentenced to go to prison. And 2 days before he was set to, show up at the prison, they discovered more Bitcoin that he had stolen and that had been completely left out of the original case. So they got a last-minute warrant to go to his house. And when they got to his house, they were pretty sure that he was going to run because he still had $800,000 of Bitcoin, and he was about to run, and they caught him last minute, and then he went to prison, and they gave him an extra 2 years, which I think came out to 6 years total. Yeah, is all he got. So it was a pretty interesting little story. Yeah. So, but that shows you just kind of, I guess, who he is a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
Or is it?
Order, baby.
Are there any new technologies that Ross could have put in place, to protect himself, in the current era, that weren't available when he was put into prison, that might protect other people doing something? Well, I don't know if I want to say this on camera, but
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely at the time they were just using Bitcoin. They didn't have coin mixers even yet. There wasn't Monero. Like at the time, people thought Bitcoin was private. Obviously, Bitcoin is a public, transparent ledger. It's as far from private as you can possibly get. You can be pseudonymous, where someone doesn't know that that address is you as a person. But yeah, that was kind of the big, they were using Tor network. They didn't realize it was compromised. They were using Bitcoin. They didn't realize it was very public. So if you did it now, there's alternatives to Tor. There's a couple blockchain alternatives. There's a thing called aTor actually that's like just mirrored it to just make a new version of the same thing. So there's like definitely some options there. You could use Monero or one of the privacy focused things, or do like tons of tumblers and mixers, but that's all illegal too in a sense. Like that's why Samurai, the Samurai wallet developers are being prosecuted, is because they had a built-in mixer in their wallet. And so whenever you send, you could have it send and tumble, so you had privacy. And so the U.S.'s government's saying that was money laundering. So it's, and then we never really know too. Like when they have the back doors on things, like they don't let us know that they have a back door until they've taken advantage of it in a big way usually. So any tech is only safe until it's not.
You mentioned that one of the most beneficial organizations which have benefits from war on drugs is CIA. And I believe a lot of people right now think that Trump attempt to kill was organized by the same company. So do you think it's possible that during Trump term we will see the end of the war on drugs?
It's possible. Anything's possible, right? But I mean, at the same time, Trump has talked positively about the death penalty for drug dealers. So, I mean, if
illegal aliens who kill an American.
But it's hard to, I mean, I don't think that there's, I don't know. I don't think it's flipped enough financially for ending the drug war to fly yet with the lobbyists and everything. I think I don't know. It's hard to say. It would be great. Obviously, that would be a huge thing. I mean, there's so many states. Obviously, Colorado is one of them that has put in place so many things to try to fight against the way that the drug war handles drugs and addiction. And I think we all know that like putting people in jail for possession of something or for like these things are crazy. That doesn't make any sense. It's not going to help somebody heal to put them in prison with a bunch of criminals in a violent setting. That doesn't make life better. I don't know. It's tough to say. I'm with Trump. It's like he's a politician. He used to be a wrestler. You guys remember when he was on was it WCW or WWE? Yeah, WWE. Like he was a reality star. Like he says a lot of stuff. Like I take his election as a positive in the sense that he was voted for mostly by people who were listening to the rhetoric of less wars, less government, more freedom, RFK, Ron Paul, like that's the narrative that got him elected. Yeah. So whether or not he follows through, I feel like that was a good litmus test. Just like the first time when he ran, it's like he got elected because he was talking about auditing the Fed. And he was he didn't do the stuff, but the fact that people are wanting it and voting for it, I feel like is a great indicator. And that's the important thing is, again, it's the cultural opinion is what really matters in the end. Just like the fact that weed was illegal everywhere for so long and nobody really, everybody still smoked weed in all those states if they wanted to, right? Turns out laws don't stop anything from happening. So it's just a matter of if it's still profitable to keep it there or if it's not benefiting anybody anymore, then you can roll it back pretty easily.
I have kind of a double question that they're somewhat related. For Free Ross Now, assuming that Ross is free day one, does that 1% still continue to go to him and his family and his, effectively rehabilitation into the modern world? Or what else would happen to that 1% that's currently part of that token?
Yeah, so we don't know for sure. It's going to depend on him a little bit too. We don't even know if he's going to actually accept it. Because the family stopped the trust donations. All the donations for the last decade were to the Ulbricht Freedom Trust. So they stopped those when Trump got elected because that can only be used for clemency work and stuff. And so that's when we set up the new wallet and just start sending money there for Ross. But for all we know, Ross is going to get out and just want to live in the woods or something. You know what I mean? Like, we really don't know. Right now, that wallet for him is already the largest holder of the token. And so by the time he gets out, it'll be even more, because every day just more and more gets eaten into it. And yeah, we can keep feeding him, and we can pivot it to go to other causes if he's taken care of. There's going to be donations from a lot of Bitcoiners, so many people know that crypto wouldn't be where it is without him. And so we're down to keep sending it to him, or we're down to pivot it to the next thing. We're already working actively with a bunch of people on the Free Roger campaign. I'm going to see Aaron Day in a couple days down in Florida. He's distributing Roger's book and pushing the campaign a lot. So it's like, yeah, we're gonna keep moving it forward into something, whether or not it continues to be Ross, or if I think he's going to be rich as hell, honestly. As soon as he asks, right? Like, as soon as he asks for donations, I think he'll have more money than he can ever spend. And we'll be part of that for sure. But like, our 40K, 60K, whatever we're sending him is going to be nothing compared to people sending him like whole Bitcoins at a time, dozens of Bitcoins at a time kind of thing.
Yeah, so, fingers crossed.
Right? Like, I think so. I think so.
So my other question is, and I asked this question in regards to the Free Ross Now token, but with the context of the Free Ross DAO. So the DAO was started essentially with, I think, similar goals in mind. And based on my understanding from Renee, a friend of Ross, Ross requested it be shut down, essentially, because of, I believe what was repeated to me was the optics of it, that he didn't want to have like strong affiliations to crypto in the midst of trying to get a pardon, essentially. Right. And so I think you sort of answered this. It sounds like Free Ross Now is operating independently of Ross and his family, and is simply something that's then doing donations, versus the DAO that was operating specifically by his friends and family on his behalf and with his name in a different way. Is that right?
Yeah, and some people made some really bad choices. Like, things went really sideways. So when he asked for it to get shut down was because it was it would have gotten really bad probably. There was somebody trying to steal money. They had lost some money doing something stupid. There was, Lynn gave me the whole rundown on that earlier last year, and it was a whole mess. So yeah, we've made it very clear from the beginning, like, this is just us supporting Ross. Actually, it was fun. We had to change our name on Twitter, our display name on Twitter a few weeks ago, because Lynn reached out because someone at the White House actually thought that we were them, like, because we're so much louder on Twitter, because we are on Twitter all the time. Someone at the White House was like, "Hey, your account's talking shit about Trump or the government." They didn't give her details. I'm like, well, we haven't said anything negative about Trump. Very much, like, definitely some more loosely negative about the government stuff in there. But so we had to like change it to like FRN on Solana instead of just being called Free Ross Now, and put a big thing at the beginning like unofficial community supporting Ross. And then it made a big post about like, hey, White House, if you're seeing this, I'm not Ross or his family. So we've got the benefit of that. Like, they're not involved in that sense, but also I speak to Lynn regularly, and so we've been able to adjust things when they need it, or like, to help in that way, like make sure that we're not stepping on any toes or doing anything that could hurt the process.
Do 3 more.
Real quick, thank you for coming. One more question. America also has a storied tradition of throwing people in jail that create software that they consider a national security threat. I think the first time that I noticed it, heard about it, was with PGP in 1991. That guy is a true freedom fighter, and PGP is still used today. Who in the crypto world has come under the same strain and stress in terms of creating a technological product that the government views as a threat to national security?
Well, I mean, I think right now they're basically kind of claiming that with Samurai and Tornado Cash, because there's the big argument when they did the arrest for Tornado Cash was this is being used to funnel money into Iran. That was the argument. Like, it wasn't even the drug stuff. They were trying to say that it was Iran using it to Right. Yeah, exactly. The ones that don't have IMF central banks. Weird coincidence again. I'm sure there's people that we don't even know about. Like we don't know that they're being targeted and stuff. When you start looking into like the voice to skull technology, the ELF, like being able to make people hear voices, stuff that the CIA has been pretty open about for a couple decades. I'm sure that people like John McAfee and so many that kind of seem to go off the rockers right as they're getting really loud about things. I think there's some involvement there. Roger, most of the cases right now are more just about, it's all like the privacy centric stuff. So they aren't, I haven't seen them raising the national, I haven't seen them raising the flag of national defense yet, but I'm sure it's only a matter of time. And it'd be so easy to do, just say, oh, this was used in Russia, or oh, this was used in Iran, and then you just run that story. But so far, they just say money laundering and drugs or whatever, and most people kind of, ooh, that's bad. Something that just came to mind actually is I forgot last Friday, the 11th, was the 12-year anniversary of the death of Aaron Swartz. Another example of this, Aaron Swartz, huge warrior for freedom of information. Aaron Swartz was one of the people that helped create a whole bunch of stuff. RSS, he was involved in Reddit. He very much, his fingerprints are all over the internet as we see it today. And there's a really good documentary about him called The Internet's Own Boy. I recommend everybody watch. And he, while he was at MIT, he was it MIT or Harvard? I think it was MIT. He was downloading journals, peer-reviewed journals, which, as you probably know, whether they're in the medical world or the tech world or whatever, they have tons of paywalls. You have to be part of an institution a lot of times. And so he was downloading thousands and thousands of these journal papers and publishing them for free online publicly. And they arrested him for it. They were charging him with a separate federal charge for every one of these like 71,000 documents. They said that he was going to, rest of your life for sure, if not more, like Ross. And the official story is that he killed himself in custody. It's not quite as obvious as with Epstein, but I don't know. I wouldn't, certainly if there's a situation where it makes sense, it's looking at spending the rest of your life in a cage. But also, you just never know. And he had so much information, like the trial would have been really messy. Let's just say that. A lot of stuff would have come out. A lot of things, he was involved with a lot of different organizations. Like, it would have been a really messy trial. Instead, it was a really short news article about him dying. So just, on that topic of people that have been targets over the years and stuff.
Hanged
And
himself, right?
supposedly, yes.
Just like Epstein.
Yep. Yeah.
So I have two questions. The first one is, what did you say he was charged with officially? And the second one is, why do you think the mainstream media like Rolling Stone started painting him in a positive light after he had been smeared for so many years?
Okay. So Ross's charges, not counting the ones that were made up and they dropped, like his actual court was like hacking was a few things. There was like wire fraud and money laundering. It was all like conspiracy to commit, conspiracy to aid. It was all like sort of sideways language at it because they had no record of him ever selling any drugs or buying any drugs. They had no they couldn't pin anything directly on him. So it was a lot of these things, and then they made it a RICO case. So they gave him what people call colloquially like Godfather charges or kingpin charges. So basically they said that he was responsible for all of the transactions on the site because he was running it. So then they charged him with that level of being basically like El Chapo or some, anybody running a cartel or something. They treated him that way. But it was all, it was a mix of things. Most of them, that's the unfortunate thing. Unless he gets a pardon, he actually won't be able to touch a computer or anything either because it's all computer, a bunch of them are computer related charges. It's crazy. But it was like mostly money laundering, wire fraud, hacking, conspiracy to distribute or conspiracy to aid in the distribution of illicit substances. But it's like multiple charges of all of them too. So he ended up with like 60 something charges that stuck. Oh, and then the Rolling Stone piece. I mean, it's hard to say. Like, the story became more and more known kind of over years, right? The media smeared it really hard when it was new. And then the book came out and the movie, the Silk Road movie. There's two. One's actually pretty good, The Deep Web, and the other one called The Silk Road is terrible, or dishonest. And maybe it's a decent movie in purely movie sense, but there hadn't been anything since 2018, 17, 18. The media just hadn't talked about him at all. So the only sound around Ross has been the Free Ross movement for that whole time. And then I think it's a piece of just crypto shifting, like from BlackRock and everybody trying to get in to, and just like the shift in value where now all these people who were like not necessarily important players financially are now super wealthy. Like that huge shift, like the Libertarian Party, never minded what percent of the votes, the Libertarian Party went from tiny percent of the wealth to a much bigger percent of the wealth because there's no party more represented in Bitcoin, right? And I think that was a lot of it, was just this shift around the topic in general, around Bitcoin in general. And So I got shadow banned. I got our account shadow banned on Twitter for 2 weeks because I replied to Elon with something. A bunch of people were like trying to get him to tweet about Ross, and I jumped in and said something about how, it'd be good for you if he was pardoned because Ross's case could also be used as precedent against you. Because the whole case against Ross is he ran a platform, people did illegal stuff on it, he was charged with everything they did. Well, X and Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook and Signal and Telegram and WhatsApp, etc., are all used to sell illegal drugs every single day, as well as prostitution and guns and all these other things. So I feel like maybe there's some, I don't know if, I haven't heard it talked about much, but I feel like there might be some angle of that too. Like Zuckerberg and Musk and these folks, it's better for them for Ross's case to go away because they're effectively in a very similar position, except they've paid billions of dollars in bribes.
Last question. So I wanted to talk about Roger. So you mentioned all the organizations he had funded. I wanted to mention, it came out recently that he was a big funder of WikiLeaks, which nobody knew for a long time. He also funded DefCat a lot. He did a big fundraiser for them years ago. So that's 3D gun printing. But more about Roger. What do you think are his chances of getting pardoned as well? And I feel like I've seen this a lot, that a lot of the Bitcoin community really doesn't like him anymore because of his role in the block size wars, which full acknowledgement, he made some mistakes in that. I would definitely agree with that. But I think Roger has actually done more for freedom and liberty than almost anyone in the history of like the world, other than like Ron Paul and I don't know, maybe Rothbard. I'd put Roger up there with the amount of contributions he's made, even though he has also been a flawed character. So I'm just curious, what do you think his chances are of getting out, and how do you feel about that split in the Bitcoin community?
Yeah, it's definitely been crazy to watch when he just came out and did a couple interviews recently. There's a couple where it was him taped up and his lawyer was speaking, and they did the one with Tucker Carlson where he spoke, the first time he's spoken since the charges started. And yeah, to see when it comes to Ross, it's like everybody's supportive if they're in the crypto space, or they are just like, don't know who he is maybe. When it came to Roger, it was like full 50-50, like flame wars happening, like people trying to say that he's the devil, basically. And I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy how people can get so tribalistic so easily about it doesn't matter what it is. You can form a tribe around it and then say, you're not in my tribe. And yeah, it was really weird to watch. And I don't know. It's so mind-boggling. I'm still reeling from when it happened in 2016 and 2017 and watching the movement and the infighting and this whole crazy thing happen. But at the moment, he hasn't been talked about at all by Trump or any of them, right? So there's no reason to think that it's cooking, because they seem to like get the rumors out there pretty quick, because that's what gets you the hype, that's what gets you the cheers and stuff. He also hasn't actually gone to court yet or anything, right? So I don't know that. I don't know. I mean, you can technically pardon him for it, but I don't know. They don't do that very often for people that aren't in the club. I I don't know. I don't think he's going to go to prison. I don't think he's going to actually serve time. I think they're going to get more money from him, right? I don't think he's not going to play ball, right? We know that about Roger. He's not going to plead. He's not going to play like they're going to get X amount of money from him. And he's going to spend 5 times as much in court fighting him probably. But hopefully he won't even have to get brought back to the U.S. at all, and it can just happen through paperwork and stuff. But I don't think he'll go to a cage. I do think it's going to be a hassle for like all of this year at least. It seems like it.
That's our talk. Give it up for Kenny.
Thank you.